يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Saturday edition of Let's Talk. And of course, as always, we have interesting interviews lined up for you. We're going to talk to an author about a book he's written, and it's called Steal a Few Cents. Then we're going to be talking to the South African Guide Dog Association about their Centre of Mobility. How is it that they help people who have problems with their sight? How do they help them lead a regular life as possible? But right now we're going to talk to a professor of pediatrics, oncology and hematology. She is Professor Janet Poole, and she's going to talk to us about thalassemia today. She's based at the Charlotte Macleay Hospital right here in Johannesburg, and I always have a problem pronouncing that second word because it's a Xhosa word. Let's hope that I don't have further problems when I pronounce that. It's easier for me to say Joburg Hospital, but I don't think that's quite acceptable. But let's get on to the interview. Thalassemia is what we're going to talk about, and we do hope that you're going to enjoy the information that we share with you this morning. Professor, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you so much for taking out time from your very busy day to be here with us and to share valuable and important information. Now, when we look at thalassemia, I know it's some form of very rare blood disorder. We'll talk about that, we'll unpack it. But I was asked by a regular viewer, because I think one of her family members or certain family members suffer from the condition, and they're very probably anxious to know more about it. Is this a form of childhood cancer, perhaps?
No, not at all. It's an inherited blood disorder where the hemoglobin, which is the pigment in red blood cells, is not manufactured properly because there's a defect in the gene that manufactures the hemoglobin.
Why do they, present when I presume they are born with it?
Yes, basically it's inherited. So both parents have to be carriers of the gene. And that is, the term for that condition is thalassemia minor or carriers, okay? And the carriers do not really have any medical problems. The mother might have a slightly lower hemoglobin during pregnancy, but it's often mistaken for iron deficiency. And then if the gynecologist, the obstetrician is not aware of the condition, that they don't test the mother and the father, then there is a possibility that the child will be born carrying the mother's gene and the father's gene, and therefore becoming a thalassemia major, or the affected individual. So it's predetermined long before birth. It's at conception.
So it's not environmentally related at all. There's a genetic factor, obviously.
It's genetic. It's completely genetic.
All right. So the two carriers, the husband and wife, won't be affected, but their children or subsequent children will be affected.
Yes.
What does that tell us? Will that child then grow up to lead a normal and a regular life? We're going to be talking about risk, signs, symptoms, all of that a little later on. But I'm just trying to understand. So mom and dad are okay simply because they are carriers. Yes. They've got what is called thalassemia minor.
Yes.
But the child then has the gene which is thalassemia major, I presume.
Well, every chromosome is a pair. So and because the defective gene is on both the chromosomes, then the child cannot make hemoglobin properly, and therefore becomes anemic very, very early on in life, usually before the age of 6 months, although it can be a little bit longer than that, depending on the mutation of the which gene it is. Okay.
Let's look at the situation. Let's assume both the parents know that they are the carriers. 99% of the time, obviously, would suggest that the child or children born to them would then be suffering from thalassemia.
No, not all
necessarily.
of them. It's because at conception there's a because the parents have one normal gene, there is a chance that the child may be normal, okay, get both normal genes from father and mother. They may be a carrier, so getting which is a 50% chance, so they might be a thalassemia minor, and then is about a 25% chance, so 1 in 4 of the offspring at each pregnancy will have a chance of being affected. So it's not all the children, but it's a
that's a blessing.
but it's with each pregnancy. So
there is a risk.
So there's a 1 in 4 risk. So even if you have one child with thalassemia affected, it doesn't mean that the next pregnancy won't be affected. So many couples take the chance that the next child will be okay, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
For those couples that are planning on having more children, more than one child, and they find that the first child is a carrier and is affected by the condition, what can they do in the subsequent pregnancies to prevent this from happening, if it is at all possible, number one? Or what sort of medical interventions can be put into place when baby is born, or even whilst baby is in mommy's tummy, to perhaps cut the risk or help this child be as healthy as possible?
Well, once the child is conceived, the genetic material is
there
fixed.
already.
It's there already. So if a couple know that they are both carriers, they can have antenatal diagnosis before the fetus is 12 weeks old. And then, of course, there is the option, if the child is found to be affected, to have a termination of the pregnancy. Now, obviously, in some cultures, and obviously in the Muslim culture, this is not an acceptable way to go, but it is an option, okay, that can be happening. Of course, in 2018, okay, there are various places, not mainly here in South Africa, but elsewhere in the world, that would do selections, genetic alterations before conception, okay? But that's very expensive, and I don't know that that's acceptable to the Muslim culture either.
Would that almost guarantee, it's a very strong word, but almost guarantee that child then will be born without that defective gene?
It cannot be a natural pregnancy, so it has to be done in the lab.
Oh, of course, yes.
And then they can select the
ovary,
the gamete, the thing that doesn't have the two genes.
But as you correctly point out, that in a lot of cultures that's not acceptable. Yeah. That being said, are there no other medical interventions that can be?
Once the genetic
is there, there's nothing
else that you can do.
Gene therapy, which is kind of on the horizon right now.
Well, gene therapy is not for prenatal anything at the moment.
Okay.
It's really once the child is born to try and make the gene normal by doing the gene therapy and inserting the gene for the hemoglobin production. But that's all postnatal, and it's still in trial. It's still experimental. So there's not many patients who who have gone through that.
So hopefully in 10 or 20 years' time, we'll see a revolution as far as the world of medicine is concerned. Okay, we're going to continue talking about thalassemia right after the ad break. Professor Janet Poole is our guest. We're talking about a rare condition. Would I be correct in saying it's a rare disease?
Yes, it's rare.
Okay, and I'm glad we're having this discussion because March has seen is celebrated as the month of rare disease awareness, and that's exactly what we're doing by way of this program. And thanks to Professor Janet Poole for her input and her presence here this morning. Let's go for our first ad break. Welcome back. I'm talking to Professor Janet Poole. We're talking thalassemia. It is a rare disease, and March is the month of rare disease awareness. We do hope that you will find some. If you have a family member, of course, or if you know someone suffering from this condition, that you're better able to understand just exactly what it is that they're going through. Professor, you did indicate that there's a genetic component, a genetic component. So the child is born with a condition. What is the outlook like as the child grows up? In terms of when they reach their adult years, are they able to have a normal enough life as possible? But perhaps I'm kind of, putting the cart before the horse. Let's look at the symptoms of thalassemia, and let's also look at that dreaded question, life expectancy.
Okay, so it's quite a long answer about the life expectancy. So the symptoms depend on the age of the presentation. So when the child the majority of children will present before the age of 6 months or before the age of 1 year, up to the age of 1 year. And then they usually present with severe anemia. So they will be very... they won't be able to feed normally. They'll get tired feeding. The child will look very pale. The child won't grow normally. Maybe get infections more easily. So the child will have severe anemia and may even go into heart failure from the anemia. Later on, because sometimes the expression of the gene is different in different mutations, the child will get a swollen spleen and liver, and also the bones will expand, especially of the face. So they'll be looking like, I don't know if you know a chipmunk. It's a little rodent animal that occurs in the States mainly, but the teeth are always and have an overbite. So because the cheekbones are expanded, because the bone marrow is trying to produce this blood, which is really not good, okay, it just expands and expands. So this is how children used to be in the first decade of life. Very severe anemia, not growing and not being able to thrive, in heart failure. And basically before the age of regular blood transfusions, the children used to die before they were the age of 10. So that's not so long ago. It's 50 years ago, 50 to 60 years ago.
So we have advanced considerably,
yes,
have we not?
Yes. So once a child is diagnosed with thalassemia, so if you come from a population that's at risk for having thalassemia, so it's not in everybody. So the populations that get thalassemia are people that are originating from Greece, from the Mediterranean area, mainly Greece, Cyprus, Italy, all of those countries, the Middle East, and then the Indian subcontinent, Pakistan and
India.
And India, yes.
Do we know why? Has it got to do with climatic conditions, lifestyle, the type of foods they eat?
Well, it's like any of the what we call hemoglobinopathies, which is disorders of hemoglobin. The carriers, okay, are selected out because their red blood cells are resistant to malaria. And so in the many thousands of years ago, the Mediterranean basin and Middle East and India were highly malarial areas. And so we cannot know at the moment who was the original person that had the mutation in the gene. But there are many, many different mutations in the different population groups. And the carriers survived because they didn't die of malaria. And so they survived to meet other carriers who, and then of course they when they had children, then the chances were very high that they would have a child with thalassemia. And so that's how any of these hemoglobinopathies actually persist. And the same thing is with sickle cell anemia, which is another
is there similarity?
No, it's not similar, okay, but it's the same principle of the carriers being completely protected against malaria so they don't die. Their red blood cells are inhospitable to the malarial parasites.
You're talking about red blood cells. I'm also beginning to wonder about blood transfusions. Is that one of the treatment options for them?
So the only treatment to carry on with life is to transfuse the patients regularly. Okay?
How regularly?
Every 3 weeks.
Sure.
Every 3 to 4 weeks.
Which means that if you're living out in the sticks or in the rural areas, you're having to travel regularly or having to live closer to a hospital.
Yes. So basically what the principle is that you want to maintain the hemoglobin at a normal level. Okay. So you don't want the child to dip down to a hemoglobin that's in the anemic range, because once that happens, then all the side effects of the anemia kick in, like the swollen spleen, the not growing, the facial features and that sort of thing. And with the blood transfusions given regularly to maintain the hemoglobin in a normal range, so we like to keep it above 10 to 11 grams, we are actually allowing them to lead a completely normal life so that they don't get infections, they grow normally, and they're able to do anything they want to do in their lives. Okay, but obviously there are some risks about blood transfusions, which I'll come to in a moment.
Of course.
Okay.
That also tells me that answers my previous questions about life expectancy. So they can go on with the right treatment and support, go on to lead as normal a life as possible, go on, marry and have their own children as well.
Well, the main issue, okay, for thalassemia patients is not, they don't mind coming for their blood transfusions. It's something that they grow up with. They know it will make them feel better, be able to do everything that they need to do, grow, etc. But with every bag of blood that they get is an increased amount of iron. And the iron does not go out of the body naturally. There's no natural excretion of any significance. So the iron is very toxic to organs in the body, and that's really what the major problem is for thalassemia patient sufferers, is to get the iron out of the body, and that requires what we call chelation. So it's giving a drug that binds to the iron that allows it to become excreted either through the kidneys or through the liver and the gut. And up until recently, I'd say about 10 or 12 years, the only chelation therapy that we've had is a injectable form of chelation. So it's a drug, I'm sure all the thalassemia patients will be very familiar with it, called desferrioxamine or desferal. And it means that they have to inject themselves with an infusion. It's like they have a little pump, and they have to sleep with it every single night of their lives.
Goodness me.
And that is what the main problem is. So if you are compliant and you do this regularly from the time that you start with the chelation therapy, which is not straight away, it's about a year or two after the transfusion start, then the organs won't get damaged, and then you can go on to grow normally, develop normally, be able to have children, etc. But we all know that when children get to their teenage years,
the risky behavior
sets in, and they don't use the pump, and they don't do whatever they're supposed to do, and their iron creeps up, and then some of the organs in the body get damaged. Some of them are irreparable, and some of them can be turned around. And this period, this teenage period years, is where most of the damage is done. When they get to their early 20s, then they begin to realize that well, I need to take care of my life, and it's often not. It's often too late to actually turn it around completely, but it is possible. It is. I've had some patients who've really persisted and turned their lives around. Yeah.
All right, very quickly, because we're coming to the end of the interview. What about is it more deadly or more serious in a male or a female patient? I'm also thinking about a female patient who might then go on to start her own family. So what does a pregnancy look like?
Obviously with pregnancy you need to transfuse them more. The oral chelated drugs that we have, they can't take because they cross the placenta. But certainly the pregnancy is not abnormal in any way. The child may be a little bit smaller than normal, but obviously the child will definitely be a carrier, because the child will get a gene from the mother, and depending who she marries or has a child with, that will depend on what the child is. Yeah.
It is, my final question, it is Rare Disease Awareness Month. This falls under the spectrum of rare diseases. What else can you say about this? How aware should we be about, and what type of support do we give to patients and families who have siblings, who have children and siblings with this condition?
It's a very intensive lifestyle. Okay, it's a chronic disease, a chronic illness. People get tired, of always maintaining things. But having said that, if you are compliant and you do carry on, you can live a normal life. I don't know what the exact life expectancy is right now. In 2018, the oldest thalassemia patient is probably around 50 to 60, in the world. But that's a patient who's been compliant all his life. But if the iron is damaging some of the organs, especially the liver, the heart, the endocrine organs, then the expectancy will be less.
Okay. You've written quite a number of papers on this condition. Why the interest in thalassemia?
I was, when I was a pediatric registrar, when I was learning to be a pediatrician, I did quite a bit of time at the old Coronation Hospital, now Rahima Musa Hospital.
Of course.
And that is where the thalassemia clinic for Indian patients was. And I looked at this group of patients and thought, this is an interesting disease, and these patients have got such an uphill battle. And in those days, it wasn't as advanced as now. And so we had to rotate through this clinic and make sure that the patients all got their treatments and all the
and you never
quirks
look
and
back
everything. I never
since.
look back.
Thank
Yes.
you indeed. Please continue the amazing work that you're doing. God bless, and thank you once again for sharing all of this with us on thalassemia today.
My pleasure.
To hope to meet up with you
Yes.
again sometime soon. That was Professor Janet Poole talking thalassemia. It's a rare blood disorder. Children are born with it, and obviously it is there is a genetic component to it. It is transferred from generation to generation via genes. And that's it for this part of the interview. We're still going to be talking mobility training, and we're going to be talking to an author about a book, interesting book at that, and I think it's called Saving the Pennies, or something to do with pennies. But we'll get to, Steal a Few Cents. There you go. Interesting title of the book, and we look forward to that discussion. Stay with us. And I'm pleased to introduce our next guest. His name is Rupert Smith, and he's written a book, Steal a Few Cents. It's all about, I think, the mining industry, and I think reading the book, I've not read the book as yet, but I should imagine would give you a very, very deep insight into the mining industry. Rupert, morning, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you.
Now, I know that you were in the corporate world for a long time, working in mining houses, mining companies.
Yes.
Were you ever underground?
Well, I've been underground. Julie, I am a lawyer by training, and worked with the mining industry first as a lawyer and then as part of a corporate that was in coal mining. So yes, I have been underground, but never working underground. I've been underground for the purposes of doing the inquiries which follow the very unfortunate events where people get killed and get injured in the mining industry, because mining is a very dangerous thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Are you retired?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and enjoying your retirement, I should
That
imagine.
I am,
Is
yes.
that why you wrote the book?
Yes, well, I wrote the book because, writing is my hobby, and because there are issues in and around the mining industry and in and around South Africa which are fundamental issues, and some of the things I try to tease out in the book. Mm-hmm. It's a work of fiction. It's a whodunit. It's a murder story, but that is to provide a background for investigating the deeper issues which confront us generally in South Africa and more specifically in mining.
In the early years of South Africa's history, obviously mining was the industry. It was the place where masses of people were employed. It was a lucrative industry for the people at the top, but not for the people at the bottom, not for the workers.
Yes.
They really worked sweat and blood. Has that scenario changed?
No, it hasn't. And you put your finger right on the central tenet of my book. It is an investigation of that divide, the juxtaposition between the owners of the mine and the workers, where the people who do the work and who risk their lives on an ongoing basis, they're not necessarily the people who are highly remunerated. And it hasn't really changed. The position stays the same as the people who own the mines and the people who are in management. They earn lots of money. And I simplify a little when I say that. But the workers are poor people. They have a back-breaking toil. And there are moral issues which confront us and which arise directly from mining, and it's, as I say, although this is a murder mystery, the issues that I try to highlight in the book have to do exactly with what you're busy talking about, that divide between owners and management on the one hand, and on the other hand, the poor people who do the work.
You're not going to be very popular with your ex-colleagues, are you, by making that statement?
No.
But having said that, this is a fact right across the board, whether it's mining or any other corporate environment.
Yes.
The guys at the top earn really fat cat salaries,
Yes.
and the people who do the actual work, there's such a great divide between them. And perhaps, and it's got nothing to do with your book, but I mean, that gap needs to be closed, because if it doesn't get closed, we're going to, at some point, we're going to have some form of an uprising.
Well, you know, I don't know. I can't see into the future. The divide between the wealthy who don't do the work and the poor who do the work, that divide has been since time immemorial.
And it's not unique to South Africa.
No, not at all. And it's not unique to the 21st century. You know, if you go back 2,000 years to Roman times, there were slaves who did the work. They didn't get paid at all. So, to an extent, the workers are better off than they have been historically, but that divide remains absolutely.
Very wide. Okay. Is this the first book you've written?
It's not.
Tell us about your previous books.
The previous book was a book called Metal, and it was partly autobiographical and partly about the same issue, about corporate fraud.
Well, I think the title speaks for itself, metal, as
Yes.
in all the metals that we take out of the ground.
There was a silly pun in the book. It was spelled METTLE, as in test your metal.
Okay.
But it was also about gold mining. So
All
there you
right,
go.
okay. In all the years, you know, you are a lawyer by profession, and then having worked in the corporate space, but in the mining corporate space, you've gained so much of knowledge of that particular industry. When you look at the landscape today, the mining landscape in South Africa, do you think, apart from the coal mines, which we'll come to in a short while, how do you see it evolving? We've had issues where people have bought up mines and stripped the mines off. I don't know what the initial idea was to buy the mines, but they've bought the mines, stripped the mines of all valuable assets, and poor miners that again have worked themselves to the bone were left absolutely destitute. They weren't paid for months on end, and eventually those mines closed down. And I don't know if these people have done it for tax write-offs or whatever whatever it was. That's the one scenario, and the future of mining, specifically gold mining in South Africa.
Look, the people who buy mines to asset strip them do so because they're dishonest. And dishonesty is unfortunately one of the main issues which confront us in South Africa, not just in the mining industry, but as the entire South Africa.
Let's call it what it is, corruption.
Yes, that's right. Corruption is public dishonesty, and asset stripping is private dishonesty. There have always been people who are privately dishonest. What I do in my book, if I can divert slightly
We
my
don't
answer.
want to give away too much,
No,
because
no,
we want
we
people
don't.
to go out and buy the book.
This is so. The central premise of my book is a comparison between two types of dishonesty. There is in the book a poor man who tries to steal. He tries to steal a few
cents.
Yes. And what happens to him? And the juxtaposition is with a wealthy man who steals a lot. And what happens to him?
And
Now,
how we end up admiring him.
well, the line in the book is where the title comes from, is steal a few cents and they put you in jail, steal a few millions and they put you in charge. That's the issue of the book.
How does that get you as a lawyer? I mean, what does it say to you? Does it not just want you to go out and fight this horrible injustice?
Well, you see, it's in the book, the poor boy who steals some money, he does so because he really has no alternative. I know you're familiar with the expression of a black tax, but what happens to the new generation of newly qualified black professionals is they come from a position of inescapable poverty. So they have a generation that goes before them that subjugates their entire existence to the pushing of a new generation into a position where they can determine their own existence.
Position of power?
Well, not a position of power, a position of qualification. So what you do is you have a mother who is a domestic servant, and she sacrifices her own existence to pushing her child or her children into a position where they don't have to be domestic workers. So what happens, and the chap in the book, he's called Frankie in the book, but I know Frankie because I met Frankie all the time.
We all have met Frankies in our lives.
What happens to him is eventually when he becomes a professional, he's the first one in the entire clan who has a professional job. The rest of the people in his family, his extended family who have jobs, they're menials. They are gardeners, they are domestic servants, they are security guards. And then all of a sudden, Frankie is in an office and he is a professional earning a real salary. But what happens to him immediately is he becomes the provider for the entire clan. And you know, and this happens all the time.
Oh,
eh?
absolutely.
Yeah. So, and there's always an emergency. There's always somebody's funeral that has to be paid for, or somebody who's ill, or a young cousin who needs to go to university or needs to go to school. There's always some issue, and the entire clan asks, and boy, do they go at this poor guy. And they get to the position, and I saw them both professionally as an attorney and as part of management in the mining industry. See, these poor kids, they get to a position where they either overspend or they do stupid stuff, like Frankie in this book. Frankie is not inherently a dishonest boy, but he gets to the position where he doesn't know what else to do, so he tries to steal. But because he isn't dishonest, he doesn't know how to steal very well. So he gets caught immediately. You know, immediately they catch him. The juxtaposition is the other guy who understands finance very well, and therefore he knows very well how to steal. And once you know how to steal, you're going to corporate fraud. That's very difficult to find. And the second aspect of it is not only is it difficult to find, it's also he steals a lot more. So the guy who runs up to you and steals your purse, well, we're outraged by him because he's stolen 120 Rand from you. But the financial director who steals 50 million, well, you don't know about that. And he has less of a direct impact on you. And that is the central issue that I investigate in the book here. On the one hand, the poor boy who gets caught immediately for trying to steal a few cents. And on the other hand, the fat cat who steals a lot.
And gets away with murder.
Well, you have to read the book to find out.
I'm talking to Rupert Smith. He says it's not the first book he's written, but today we're talking about a book called Steal a Few Cents, and I think it's a very relevant read, even though it's a work of fiction. I think you'll be able to identify with someone somewhere along who's crossed your path in life. But as a South African, I think you'll be able to identify in a very, very big way and go out and get the book and see what it's all about. And I think, it's also a bit of a heartbreaking story, but we're going to talk more about the book and the author when we get back from our ad break. Rupert Smith is the author in studio talking about his latest book. He has written a book before and it's called Steal a Few Cents, and this is what the cover looks like. I said to him off air that it's a very striking cover, but at the same time a very sad cover, and he asked me why, and I said just looking at the mine dump and this big tractor in the forefront of the picture talks to me about the back-breaking work that goes on behind the scenes, and my heart bleeds for those people. How difficult was it to write the book? Because I think you kind of draw on your experiences and people that has crossed your path in the process of life.
It was, not an easy question to answer. It takes a long time to read a book. It's a major undertaking. The reason why everybody says, I'm going to write a book, and they haven't done so, is because it takes a long time. To write the book itself was easy, because what I've done is I have drawn on a conglomerate of events that have happened to me in my life. The majority of the people and the events in my book happened to me at some point. They didn't all happen in the same sequence and in the same continuum. But for instance, as I've said to you, Frankie for me is a real person. I know exactly who I mean by Frankie, and and my heart bleeds for him, but he's still in prison as we speak. You will see that there are descriptions of a mine. They come easy to me because I've been to a mine, and very few people really have. So to draw on the incidents of a lifetime have been relatively easy, just to put them down on paper. I do have to say that there is no, the villain of the book, the villain of the piece isn't a real person. He is a conglomerate of aspects of different people I have met. When I was in practice, I frequently, unfortunately, had to deal with the fraudulent aspects of corporate South Africa. And the story, there is a fraud, a big fraud in the book, and elements of real things that happened to me or that I dealt with are in the book. So to pull the story together, I suppose, wasn't that difficult because it's for the majority true.
Who should read this book?
Oh, everybody should read the book. It's an interesting book. It's a nice book. It's a whodunit. At the beginning, I don't want to give too much away, but at the beginning you don't even really know that there is a murder because somebody is injured.
And just leave it there because
Right.
we don't want you to give too much away. We do want people to go out and buy the book. Is the book available in stores yet?
The book-
And which store would it be?
It is being pushed both into exclusives and into the independent bookstores. It has been launched in the United Kingdom and in Europe and in the United States. And logistically, there will be a launch of the book on the 9th of May at the War Museum at the Zoo. Mm-hmm. But before that, the books will be in the bookstore so that they will be available at the time of the launch.
I want to ask you a question that doesn't have anything to do with it. Maybe you've touched on it in the book. I don't know because I've not read it yet.
Yes.
But two issues that pertains to current day South Africa for me, which is absolutely heartbreaking. The first one being zamazamas. I'm sure you have come across plenty zamazamas in your life. What's your perception of them? And what is our responsibility as South Africans and mining houses towards those very destitute people?
Yeah. Oh, you asked me very difficult questions there. There are people much wiser than I am who fortunately have to try to answer those questions. But they remain unanswered. If you look at them from a simply legal point of view, what they're doing is illegal.
Of course. But they're so desperate. Their desperation is pushing them into illegal activity.
Yes. But again, you're touching the raw nerve which led me to write this book.
Okay.
Because there are those people who are in our society, they're right next to us. You see them all the time. You just don't realize the desperation of their lives. They are poor people who get pushed into positions where they don't want to be, and the zamazamas are exactly that. What they are doing is desperately dangerous, desperately. But they have no alternative. So what they do is an illegal thing. They run the risk of being arrested, being kicked off the property, being persecuted, and they run the risk of being killed. So the mining industry does its best to stop them, to say you can't do this because it's dangerous for you. And the mining industry is criticized often, I think, incorrectly, because it does do its best to keep its people and its enemies in this case safe. So there is a constant focus on safety in the mining industry as a whole, and in relation to zamazamas it's no different. But I don't really know what to do about them because these are people who are doing something that is not economically viable really. The reason why they can do what they do is because the mining houses don't think it's a place where they can make proper money. But their obligation, I think our obligation as human beings is to try to keep everybody as safe as possible. If you have a socialist streak, our obligation is to keep everybody in a position where he has enough food to eat and a place to stay.
Sadly, that's in an ideal world, is it not?
It is.
The other sad factor about the Zambazamas is that I understand there are syndicates that are managing them. And the syndicate takes half of the takings of the day or the week or however they operate, which is further exploitation of a very helpless part of our society. Perhaps that's something you want to think about in your third book. I've given you something to chew upon, haven't I?
Thank you.
There's been recently, as recent as yesterday, obviously the issue around the coal mines. Unions are up in arms because there is talk around coal mines being phased out, and up to 30,000 people will be losing their jobs. So obviously the unions are not taking it lying down. Your thoughts on it? And I'm also thinking two aspects, the issue around job losses and then the issue around the environment and pollution and alternate sources of power, etc.
You ask all these questions that are impossible to answer because they are so difficult. Those are the most difficult issues that confront the entire mining industry. To start perhaps at the back end, coal at this stage, I think there's a consensus amongst a consensus technical view. Coal at this stage truly is our only viable option for electricity. And without electricity, and there's a passage in the book about electricity in which I say exactly this.
Okay.
Electricity is dependent on coal. The only viable alternative to electricity, I think, is nuclear power.
And people are jumping up and down. They don't want nuclear power.
Yeah, we don't want coal and we don't want nuclear power, but we do want electricity.
So what's the option?
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know, because it's not wind power and it's not solar power, because it's not sufficient. Solar power only works when the sun's shining, and if you think about keeping your house going on solar power, that's a feasible alternative. But if you want to keep a bauxite smelter going on solar power, you need to cover the Free State in solar powers and solar panels. So it's not a technology which is viable at the moment. So the first question that we have to answer is, do we want coal? Do we want nuclear power? Now there's a question that's too difficult for me to answer.
It's loaded.
I really don't know the answer to that question. Once you get into coal, you have to decide, do we want coal or do we want fracking? Fracking is emotionally loaded as well. And, that's also a question that's too difficult for me to answer.
Because fracking has the issue around the water usage, the amount of water that is required in fracking operations.
Fracking is often seen as the cleaner alternative to coal mining. But, that's the second loaded question that I can't answer. There are smart people who don't know the answer. But then closing down the coal mining industry, of course, it'll put thousands of people out of jobs. And you must remember that it's exacerbated by the fact that each miner doesn't just support himself. He supports himself and his wife and his children.
Probably 10 people or 16 people.
Something in the order of that. I've seen the figures and I forget now what they are. But, it really is in the ratio of double figures to a single income earner. So you have all of those questions. So on the one hand, if you close down the coal mines, yay for the environment, because coal mining is a dirty, dirty thing, and it is as pollutive an industry as anything that we will ever invent on this earth. So to stop coal mining is fantastic for the environment. It's appalling for the people who work there. And we don't really have an alternative for the time being, because then we stop having electricity. So I don't know the answer to your question.
Well, you know what? I'm glad I've posed the question
Yes.
to you anyway. We don't have the answers, but it's going to
Yes.
give our viewers something to think about.
Yes.
And we've come to the end of the interview.
And I deal with it in the book. So if you want to know
Is
my
it
views,
coal
it's
mining?
in the book. Yes,
okay,
it's
I
coal
thought
mining.
it was gold mining,
No,
but
coal
well,
mining.
that's quite a coincidence. In closing, your final thoughts to the viewers this morning?
Well, thank you for listening to me, but read my book. It's an exciting, interesting thing. It'll keep you on the edge of your chair for a while, and I hope
And
you
it's
like
a South African story.
It is.
Rupert, thank you so much for coming
Thank
in.
you,
I
Julie.
truly enjoyed chatting with you. Good luck with the sales of the book. And I do hope that you'll be coming in again in a couple of months' time with your third book, covering the issue around the zamazamas and a whole host more.
I'm going to do that. Thank you very much,
My
Julie.
pleasure entirely. That was Rupert Smith, the author of a book called Steal a Few Cents. This is what it looks like, and he says that it has already hit the bookstore, so go out and get your copy. Thank you for watching this part of the program. We're going to be talking mobility training when we get back from the ad break. And finally, into the final segment of the show this morning, we're now going to be talking about amazing people doing amazing work with the visually impaired. We're talking to Elizabeth Lowe from the College of Orientation and Mobility, and I think the title speaks for itself. Elizabeth, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Julie, and thank you so much for having me here this morning.
Lovely to have you here. I think that the industry you're working in does just not get enough airtime, or just not enough awareness is made to the general public about the type of work you do. So the umbrella industry, or the umbrella section,
Yes.
is the South African Guide Dogs Association. Am I correct?
That's right, yes.
So you're affiliated to them?
We are a department of the SA Guide Dog Association for the Blind. So our organisation has 4 different departments. 3 of them are dog departments, and my department is the only non-dog department. And I think we are the best kept secret.
Oh,
and
wow.
People don't
I think
know
you
about
are,
us.
because I must be honest, I went to a homemaker show a little while ago, and your guys were standing and giving out pamphlets. And then I took the pamphlet and realized it's the first time I've heard of the College of Orientation and Mobility. As far as the other 3 departments are concerned, hopefully we're going to cover it with Peter. He's promised to come in sometime soon to talk about this very, very important support system to the visually impaired population or group in our country. So what exactly is it that you do? I know that you come from a teaching background.
Yes, I do. So I'm in educational management. Should we say my position is that of manager of the department. But the department itself is split into 2 sections. And we have one section which is the college that is training people to become orientation and mobility practitioners. It is a mouthful, and it is a very unique kind of job. There are very few of them in the country. There are only about 50 more or less throughout the whole country. And their main purpose is to train people who are visually impaired to use the long cane. People call it the white cane, the long cane. Some people even call it a stick, but we refer to it as the long cane, and also skills of daily living. Then the other section of my department is we employ 4 of those people who we have already trained them, and they provide community services to people who are visually impaired to teach them the skills they need once they have become visually impaired or they have lost their vision. And I think maybe a good place to start is visual impairment is one of those disabilities which people are terrified of.
Absolutely. And what I also want to say is vision impairment or any disability that someone is suffering from, we as the regular public, won't really take an interest in it because it doesn't touch us directly.
That's right.
And if we don't make it our business to get to know about it and create the awareness, it never will be out in the public space. But having said that, would you be able to tell me off the top of your head numbers around visually impaired people throughout South Africa?
Well, the exact number, but we have about 1.5 million people who are visually impaired, more or less, throughout South Africa. But that's also a statistic that has changed since the last census, and as we know, that's not currently
Very
up to
accurate.
date. It's not accurate. So we're not exactly sure how many people are visually impaired, but out of the number of people that we suspect are visually impaired, not all of them are blind. And that's something that we tend to forget, that visual impairment is a large range of conditions. So some people may have limited vision. They may have tunnel vision, where they only see a small amount out the center of the eye. They may have lost their peripheral vision, which means they can't see anything from the side of their eyes. They may have a very small amount of vision that they're still getting by with. And then we have the category of blindness. So visual impairment and being visually impaired is not a one-size-fits-all kind of category. So it ranges. And our guide dog service is there to assist people with their mobility. Again, not for only blind people. And our service as well with the long cane is, again, also to address their mobility needs, the ability to move around and to have independence within your home and within your own environment and community. So we're talking about assisting people to be able to move from point A to B. And one of the saddest things is when people lose their vision, that their family, although well-meaning, tend to cocoon them and tend to do everything for them. So now they get to sit on a chair and have everybody bring things to them, carry things.
And you think that you're being kind and
Yes.
you're expressing love
Definitely.
by doing this for your loved one
Yes.
or a family member or a friend.
Yes.
But that's not what they want. They want independence,
They
and
do.
that's where you come in at the
Yes.
college. So you spoke about the two-pronged approach. There's where you train people to assist visually impaired people on how to become independent, and then the visually impaired themselves can come to the college. Is that right?
No, it's actually an interesting system, and I know that's why I say it is a confusing thing, because my department has these two sections. So we're a college and we train O&M practitioners, and we also employ some of those people. So our O&M practitioners, the 4 of them which we employ, they provide community services. So
they go out and do the
Yes.
training.
Now, the training is also very interesting because it is a one-to-one kind of training. So they are trained by us to go out to somebody. Say, for example, you had a referral. You phoned us up and you said, I have an auntie who has lost her vision and she needs assistance. She's housebound, she can't go out, she can't do many things, she's lost confidence in herself, she can no longer do the things that she wants to do. Our O&M practitioner would then make an appointment to visit the home of this person. And we work within the Greater Johannesburg and Swane areas. We don't offer services outside of Gauteng at the moment, and we can't reach every single section. We only have 4 O&M practitioners. So they would go and visit the person in their home. So the person wouldn't even have to leave the comfort of their home environment to receive our services. Then they would be assessed and spoken to. What would they like to do? Very often we have ladies who are moms. They have lost their vision and now they feel like they've lost their purpose. They can no longer cook for their families. They can no longer do the tasks, the household tasks that they used to be able to do. And our O&M practitioners will then assess what is it they want, what can they do, do they have any vision left that can be used, and then they will design a training program for that person, an individualized program.
And how long would it typically last for? Let's assume, no two people are alike. Like you said, it's not a situation of one size fits all. So you and I are completely different. My needs would be different to yours. If they find that I'm just a very, very slow learner or very nervous, would they spend as much time as I need to be comfortable to be left on my own?
They would.
And how much is that time? A month, 2 months, 3 months?
Well, the average program, if people have no, for example, long cane skills, and they want to be taught long cane skills, then they would like to be taught the route to the local shop or the route around their own environment. That would be about 3 months on average. So they'll work with them twice a week, usually, depending on again, their schedules and the time that they have available, and they'll work with them for approximately 3 months. Some people are faster, some people are slower. It depends what you require. So if we were going to teach the aunt who now is just stuck in a chair to cook, that could be done. They could learn how to peel and chop vegetables. You could learn how to cook again, learn how to do the ironing, learn how to sweep a floor. All these things can be taught. Even if you don't have vision, you can still perform those tasks. It's just a case of learning it in a slightly different way and learning the patterns of how to do it.
But that also tells me it's intensive training, and you also need to have lots and lots of patience.
Yes.
And you, coming from a teaching background, can identify with that.
Yes,
so you really have to handpick the people to do this type of training. I'm thinking costs involved, number one, and I'm also thinking about the broader society. There are a lot of people out there who want to make a difference, they want to give back. How can they fit into the grand scheme of things at your college? So let's assume I have a couple of blind people or 2 or 3 blind people in my community, and I want to make a difference in their life. What can I do by coming to the college, and how can I put back into their lives?
Well, first of all, in terms of cost, our services cost absolutely nothing.
Oh, wow. So how are you funded?
We are funded, well, privately funded. We raise funds. We have trusts which donate to our organisation.
So you're a non-profit?
We are a non-profit, yes.
Wonderful.
And all that money funds these programs. So the employment of the person, the car they use, everything is funded privately by our own, from our organisation. We don't have any government funding at all.
But you're not saying no to volunteers?
Well, the thing is, it's difficult, because when people come to our college, they actually, for example, at the moment, our students that we are training are out in the community. They're working at organizations. So our college looks empty. It looks like nothing's happening. Meanwhile, our students are out there teaching people in the community, sending in their work. Our facilitators are marking that work, going out to visit and supervise them. And our O&M practitioners, they go out for the week. So they'll plan their week in advance. They'll make appointments with the people they're going to visit. And then they will be out. They come in on a Monday, they collect the cars, we have meetings, we touch base, they make sure their appointments are in place, and they actually work out in the community, and they come back again on Friday. So there are no people there to assist, if you know what I mean.
Okay, let's hold that thought. We're going for our first ad break. I'm talking to the lovely Elizabeth Lowe. She is from the College of Orientation and Mobility, and of course the name speaks for itself. It is a college that helps the visually impaired people to become as independent as they possibly can, and we're going to talk about assistive devices after the ad break and how that enhances their life further. So all of that and more coming up right after this. We're talking to Elizabeth Lowe from the College of Orientation and Mobility. They, of course, service the visually impaired section of our community. And like I was telling Elizabeth off air, that this is something one doesn't even think about simply because you don't have a loved one, a family member, a community member who's visually impaired. And these are the type of things we take for granted. So by way of these programs, we want to bring all of this awareness to you, and hopefully you can start thinking about it and make a difference in your own way, inshallah. Volunteerism, I'm thinking people watching us this morning feeling that, I think I can give off my time and I can become involved and make a difference in someone's life.
So I think volunteerism for us is an issue in my department because it is a highly specialized kind of training that is provided. So we don't need to make use of volunteers as such, but the assistive devices which we use, for example, a liquid level indicator. It's a little device that fits on a cup and it beeps when water is poured in.
We'll come to those devices in a minute or two, and I know there are costs involved there,
yes.
And probably I think what you would be more welcoming to is donations.
Definitely.
But back to volunteers, do you not think that this is something feasible for you as an organization to look into? So if you train able-bodied volunteers X amount every year or every term. Help them go out with your, your other trainers and assist them, or have a wider reach in the community?
Unfortunately, because we're pursuing registration with the Health Professionals Council, and our course is also a CETA accredited course, there are distinct parameters and there are rules and regulations about who can perform this kind of training. So you have to be adequately trained, and that training would have to be recognized training. So
your trainers that go out to visit visually impaired people in the community and work with them, are they visually impaired as well?
No, they're not.
Okay.
No, they are fully sighted, because one of the requirements is they need to be able to get from point A to B. Because they're working in the community and visiting people in their homes, they drive around. They spend a lot of time driving from one place to another.
What sort of qualifications do they have to work with the visually impaired and to train them to become as independent as they possibly can?
Well, many of our students actually don't come directly from school. They're not school leavers. They've usually had a background of working in a disability sector or organisation. For example, we have 2 students at the moment. Well, our total student complement is 8. They will be with us for 2 years to complete their training, and two of the current student body are already employed by another organisation which works with disability, including visual impairment. So they have a history of it, and they actually have a social work background and qualifications.
And rightly so. They're dealing with people all the time, and they need to understand each patient or each client's specific circumstances to be able to make them as comfortable as possible. How long does your training run for?
It's 2 years, and it is full-time, but some of that time is still back in their community, back with their employers, where they are completing their practical training. So that is sort of the in-service part of it. So over the 2 years, it's 4 months, and then they're back in the community for 4 months, then back again for several more months of lectures. So it's on and off over the course of 2 years. And we specialise in children as well. So they also go and spend 2 months at a school for the visually impaired to learn how to work with children. So our course is intensive, and it also is very broad.
When we talk about these trainers that go out into the community to help them become mobile, to help them orientate themselves around their homes and their immediate neighborhoods, etc., what sort of orientation are we giving them? And you mentioned a couple of devices that will assist them. You spoke about the cane.
Yes.
And you also spoke about
liquid level indicator.
The liquid level indicator. What other devices are there? How does it enhance the visually impaired person's independence, and what are they all about? Starting from the cane, because I think a lot of us take that very for granted. I mean, you very loosely refer to it as a stick. Some people refer to it as a stick, and it's so much more than that.
Definitely, yes. And also the cane is something people tend to think that if you lose your vision, you suddenly get supersonic hearing and you suddenly know how to use a long cane, and that isn't true. Just like with anything else, you need to be taught. You need to be taught how to use your hearing to enhance your other senses, and you also need to be taught how to use a cane. And a cane gives you different feedback, say, for example, from a dog. And there are many reasons why people would prefer to use a cane rather than a dog. I mean, we can think about cultural reasons, personal reasons. You may just not like dogs.
However, I have seen blind people or visually impaired people with both a dog and a cane.
That would be unusual, because they usually wouldn't
have both.
No,
okay.
Not at the same time, because the dog is performing. Actually, it's funny, I just saw a TV show yesterday where somebody was represented as doing that in an American TV show, and I immediately thought, but that isn't correct, because they use one or the other.
Right.
So, for example, the cane as well, the feedback it gives you, it doesn't tell you to cross the road. It doesn't tell you when the traffic light is green. You have to be taught to listen and use your senses to be able to determine when it is safe, and then use your cane to find obstacles in front of you, to be able to determine that the pathway ahead of you is safe to walk in.
What is so special about the cane? How different is it to perhaps an ordinary walking stick, for that matter?
Well, it's made of aluminium. Most of them are. It has a particular weight and diameter. It has a particular grip and handle, and also has a special tip, so that the tips are nylon, and the tapping of that cane provides the feedback. It can tell you whether you're changing surface, whether it's a carpet, now it's tiles. It will determine whether there are obstacles, holes in your way, whether there are rocks or anything else in your way. So what it's doing is preparing the pathway in front of the person, and they're using that as a source of information gathering to be able to walk.
That takes training
It does.
to learn to walk with a cane, am I
Yes.
right?
And practice, yes. So our trainers, our orientation mobility practitioners, they actually learn while blindfolded, so that they have the same experience.
Wow, okay.
So they learn as if they were blind people, so that they can understand exactly what it takes and what the person is experiencing when they are learning these skills. And if you can think of teaching somebody in a township environment to be able to get from their home to the local tuck shop, which may include crossing a busy road, which may not be paved, the vehicles using it may not be following traffic regulations. These things are dangerous. So to teach somebody
absolutely.
that takes a lot of skill and a lot of patience.
What other assistive devices do the people use, visually impaired people? And obviously you need training, because it just doesn't, you just don't
Yes.
feel the thing and say, all right,
Yes.
fine, this is whatever to help me. Maybe an assistive knife for the blind. I'm not sure if there's something like that.
The thing is with visually impaired people, there are special devices and things that you can buy on the internet to assist. But the three that we focus on, it's the long cane, then we have the liquid level indicator, which indicates when a cup is full. So when you're pouring something, hot or cold liquid, you know when the cup is full. There's no fear of burning yourself and also
Spilling,
people,
etc.
Yes, I mean, there are different techniques, but people say, oh, just use your finger. Who wants to put their finger in hot water? And who wants to drink that drink once you've put your finger in?
Absolutely.
And then we have the money template, which is we have money stick or a little money template to be able to learn which notes are which. So that when somebody is working with money, paying for something at a till, or receiving their disability grant, they can actually identify the different sizes of the notes and determine how much money they have. So those are the three main that we provide. There are many electronic devices as well, computer aided technology to assist people reading emails.
So for people who would like to buy those assistive devices for their loved ones, the cane, the money wallet, and the drinking device, or
Yes,
rather the
liquid level indicator.
liquid
Yes.
level indicator, if they want to buy that for their loved ones, can they just buy directly from you, or do they need to undergo training? Would their loved one need to undergo training?
Well, definitely the cane. I mean, they are available at the South African National Council for the Blind. They have a resource shop. It's in Pretoria. We don't sell assistive devices, but we do provide assistive devices to people who we train. And we prefer people to have these devices with training, because it is hit and miss, and it can be dangerous if used incorrectly. If you're not sure of how to use a liquid level indicator, you overfill the cup and burn yourself, that could be a problem. So we prefer to give them with training. So we don't charge the people we train for those assistive devices. We provide them free of charge along with the training. So that's where we would encourage people to donate to us, so that we could purchase those items for the people we train.
All right, we've almost come to wrap up time. With about 2 minutes to go, what are the other important issues that we as sighted people need to be aware of in treating and interacting with visually impaired people in a respectful, caring, empathetic manner?
I think one of the things you need to understand is that if somebody is visually impaired, they're not mentally impaired. And they also are not necessarily hearing impaired. We so often have people ignoring blind people in a conversation. If somebody were blind or visually impaired, they would be ignored because they would be shouted at and spoken to as if they are deaf or as if they are mentally impaired. And that isn't the case. They want to live productive lives as part of society and be considered as equals of everyone else. And I think treating people normally, speaking to them normally, and speaking to them with respect is an important thing to remember.
And that's where we leave it. So we're just going to give a shout out to all our listeners this morning. Please dig deep into your hearts and your pockets and make your donations to the South African Guide Dog Association. And the word I was looking for just now is empathetic. It was a bit of a tongue twister for me there, but that's the word I was looking for. Interact with people with any disability with respect, kindness, and empathy. And on that note then, we wrap up. Thank you so much for being with us on the show this morning. Till the next time, as always, a big thank you to the production team. Please take care on the roads. It is Assalamu alaikum and Khudafiz from me, Julie Alli.